What is your take on what we've heard from President Trump vis-a-vis Hong Kong in the last few hours? Is it more symbolic than substantive at this stage?
Well, President Trump has made it so we all have to stay on our heels. So I'm always sort of waiting for his latest, tweet diatribe or comment. So here's a major one. Look, I think you guys hit it on the head. It's a stunt and it's symbolic. Symbols are important, and I think as sort of a signpost of the deterioration of U.S.-China relations, it's important. But I think far more important were the export controls that the Trump administration passed early in July. And I think that Huawei decision that the UK made, a lot of the supply chains that are shifting around the world, they're as a result of that. I view that, most of the time Trump's been talking about Biden, not about the move itself. So I view this more as a stunt, more as something to buttress President Trump's anti-China credentials.
And it was interesting that you talked about the U.S. market having a good day, and that, again, seems to be a focus for him, clearly, leading up to the election. How do you think corporates, though, U.S. corporates that have exposure to mainland China and also to Hong Kong should be digesting these developments, and how should they be readjusting investment plans or supply chains, if indeed at this point they should be?
Yeah, if they're only waking up to the fact now that access to China is going to be an unsure prospect going forward, then they're pretty well behind the curve. Definitely by the beginning of July, that should have been clear. And I think even back into May and April, we saw that the U.S.-China trade war was escalating. The way you get in trouble is if you listen to President Trump, and 3 weeks ago he says that the Phase 1 trade deal is on, and then a week after that, the export controls, and now this, that, and the other thing. But I think a lot of this for companies that have been thinking forward, they've already been preparing for this, and they've had to accelerate it as a result of COVID-19. So I think a lot of U.S. companies are beginning to understand that those growth strategies that were based entirely on access to the Chinese market, those just aren't going to come to fruition. That's why you see folks scrambling to try and they're investing in India. They're trying to relocate the supply chain to Vietnam. There's talk of reshoring close to the United States. The companies that were prepared were already doing that, and the ones that have been caught flat-footed have been trying to do that rapidly over the course of the past few months. I don't think this is going to add much more than a little bit more urgency to that.
Jacob, David here. Does this change in any substantive way if Joe Biden takes the White House in November?
That's a great question, David. No, I don't think so. I think one of the things that COVID-19 has done is that it's really taken the off-ramps that might have been available for de-escalation in U.S.-China relations. It's basically gotten rid of those. Now, I was pessimistic about U.S.-China relations going back a couple of years, but I still thought there might be a chance that a Biden administration could turn it around. But if you listen to what Biden is saying on the campaign trail, if you look at the folks that he's probably going to fill, if he wins, he's probably going to fill his administration with foreign policy-wise, they're all going to be tough on China. I think the difference is that, they won't use sort of the overt, heavy-handed tariffs necessarily that the Trump administration has. I don't know that they will pull off a lot of the measures that have already been input, but I think you'll see more of the United States trying to resurrect trade agreements or renegotiating TPP just enough to get it to the U.S. Congress, rebuilding relationships with U.S. allies that have been neglected in the Trump administration. That, I think, is what Biden would do. But no, I don't see Biden cozying up to China or even kind of getting back to a pragmatic relation with China. I think, unfortunately, we're locked in here with a U.S.-China long-term strategic conflict.
I like that word pragmatic, and we've referenced how markets have just ignored this a couple of times already in the last couple of minutes here, Jacob. Can I assume that either Trump or Biden, they don't push this as far as it being disruptive to either markets or the economy? In other words, what I'm trying to ask is this as bad as it possibly gets between U.S. and China?
Oh, no, I think we're just at the beginning of the U.S. and China. Look, part of the sort of thing that's wrong with the way that the Trump administration is thinking about this is that a lot of U.S. multinationals, they were for Trump putting so much pressure on China because they wanted access to the Chinese market. They're all now aghast, and I think you've seen some of the support for Trump evaporate because they realized that Trump really wasn't thinking that way. He was sort of halfway, sort of quasi-protectionist versus in his own mind just sort of waking up one morning and deciding what he thought was a good idea at the time. I do think that under a Biden administration, you will see the United States get more targeted and more strategic about what it's going to do. But ironically, that's going to be read as even more hostile by the Chinese. I think China has understood that Trump likes to strut a little bit and likes to pull off these stunts, but they've also, I think, realized that they can kind of manage it. I think Biden would really try to bring the full brunt of U.S. power and U.S. strategy to limiting China's rise. And I think China's probably more nervous about what a Biden administration looks like and how it deals with China going forward in this current context that Trump has helped create.
Jacob, do you think the phase one trade deal survives the expected tumult of the next few months?
I don't really, I think, phase one trade deal, that was always semantics. I don't think there ever was a phase one trade deal. There was a purchase agreement for goods that China was going to buy anyway. And no, I think it was pretty well dead on arrival. I don't think you're going to get a phase two trade deal, and I don't think you're going to sort of get a de-escalation. I think we're looking at a real deepening of the U.S.-China trade war, a real deterioration of globalization, the emergence of rival spheres of influence with China at the center of one and the United States at the center of another.